concerned about larger issues and how we might come together to impact social and human rights issues, right? So I always like to say I don't speak for Kappa, I don't speak for AKA or Delta or Sigma Gamma Rho. I speak for Black Greek Speech, and I think I need to be clear for that. So when it comes to other organizations, that is one of the concerns. Like, who are we speaking for, right? And I often make the statement, well, we're speaking as Black people who are impacted or wanting to impact various issues on social justice. Kappa doesn't deny my voice, right? Like, if I go to a rally or to an event, I still am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go to my bio, you're going to see Kappa on that bio, right? So, absolutely. So I think part of that is D9 members are trying to ensure that they're not speaking for us, and it's amazing that we have that conversation, because I often respond to, well, when you go to do something for the NAACP, you don't ask. Ben Jealous was the president and CEO of, and he's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. When Ben asks you to join the NAACP, you don't ask who am I speaking to. So we have to kind of be mindful of that kind of concern. But I think the other thing that is really important to mention that I think BGS is trying to fill a gap on, and this is the hidden secret. 90%, roughly 90% of everybody who are in these D9 organizations are inactive with those organizations. Our organizations as Black Greek letter organizations, Kappa, Delta, AKA, Alpha, Omega, Sigma, all of them are operating on a minimum amount of duly initiated membership. And so what I said was, we have to ask ourselves why. Any business that is not maintaining 90% of its clientele has to either restructure, go out of business, or begin to reevaluate, right? So I said, okay, I want to go after the 90% and figure out why you aren't doing anything. Like, why is just having a license plate and wearing a shirt just good enough, right? And what I found was most of the members that I was engaging with did not find any relevancy outside of the social capacity of what they did as members of these Greek letter organizations, which is interesting to me. Because when we look at, for instance, our political landscape, you're in Atlanta, right? Your mayor is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, right? You can look at your school boards; they're members of Delta Sigma Theta and Alpha Kappa Alpha. I mean, so to have that kind of understanding, yet again, is, in my opinion, because we no longer teach. I think this is my critique, and I could be wrong, and I'm always willing to allow other people to present an alternative view. But we no longer teach the collectivity and the power of our collective work as members of these organizations, right? To impact social change, right? Like, my critique of certain organizations, for instance, that say, well, part of our first engagement was in the women's suffrage movement. Well, that's great, but that was 1913, right? Like, this is 2016, and still African Americans are not voting, right? Like, that's a problem, right? Like, mass incarceration has disenfranchised literally almost half of our population of people. So where's our suffrage movement? Because really that suffrage movement that you're talking about was for white women, and they got their vote, right? They're running for president, right? They're running for Congress. So I want to kind of reinvigorate our thinking as Black Greek letter organizations to do that work. And if they do that work, then we're all good.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm an activist at heart, and that is an issue. It is an issue that, and as you mentioned, I watch even the things as little as what we post in our private group, and I can't speak for Ty, but in our group, man, you post something. Let's just say you post a beautiful woman, and you'll get 600 comments. You post something about social advocacy and you hear crickets. And so you just kind of wonder, like, where's a mindset? You post something about entrepreneurship or things of that nature or history, and folks want to be quiet. But, so it is a problem. We're adults, man. We're grown. We're not kids, what I mean? And as members of these organizations, the pledge process and the fun we had while we were on campus, that's one thing. But now we're adults with kids going to college, right? And so what are we going to show them? Ty, I want to come back to you. I stomped all over you were breaking down what we were going to talk about with the event. Let's get back to that because we want to talk. I know you want to focus on the school to prison pipeline, mental health training are things that we're really focused on. So let's get back to that so we know what we're coming to support on the 8th.
May I just respond to what
Absolutely.
Briefly? Okay. I think that one thing that that we do have to consider is that when we talk about, why when we begin to talk about subjects like social justice and entrepreneurship, why there's crickets, is because I think we have to acknowledge that there is a breakdown in our perception generally in terms of what we think that we can do. I think we have to, I've noticed that a lot of us don't like to acknowledge it, but there is a duality that a lot of African Americans function in. We have the language that we speak when we're amongst each other, and then we have the language that we speak when we're in our corporate jobs or whatever setting that we're in. And in order to survive with that type of constant duality, your passion, your feelings, your understanding about these things, these are things that some people have to put into a particular place and leave it there. And I think that we have left it in that place for so long, we've become disconnected from our true power. I think it's one of the reasons why much of what we see, we tend to promote a certain fear amongst ourselves in terms of how we interact and what's right and what's wrong. Case in point, like with the discussion of Corinne Gaines. We had that, people have the discussion and look at what Corinne did wrong, but we just didn't look at the humanity of it enough to say that's really a violation of her Fourth Amendment right. So I think that in a way we've stopped humanizing one another. That's become a normal way of thinking, and it's not an act of hatred, although I think it is perceived that way. I think it's an act of self-preservation.
Yeah.
So to go back to that, again, to focus on what we're doing with this event. With this event, I've titled it The Empowerment Project, because what we want to do is make this an ongoing series to help people take the scales off their eyes and realize that they truly are empowered and that our power lies within our speech, within our voice, within our ability to vocalize, not act out, as we do in the riots and all of these things. Not to say that, I understand riots are the language of the unheard, but I think that we'll riot because we don't recognize we have the power to vocalize and that we ought to vocalize, and then knowing what to vocalize. So, one of the examples, giving credit to Mayor Reed for his leadership in the activism that has taken place here in Atlanta. When the police come out to that 10,000 person protest that we had, they weren't out there in riot gear. They were there with the understanding that they're respecting our constitutional right to do this. And I think he showed tremendous leadership in that. And to take this a step further, when they accepted that $1 million from GE to enhance the diversity and leadership training, I think that's something that needs to be talked about. I think that's something that our community needs to understand, the significance, the impact of what he has done. And that office has directly and openly acknowledged that their actions are a direct reflect of what Black Lives Matter is doing. So when we understand that, there is a power in activism, but there's also a responsibility, as Marlon said, because activism is what shines the light on it. But then advocacy and policy work is where we really begin to make the change. So with this event, I want to have these people come out so they can understand, talk to people that can help them understand policy. Case in point, when we have the speaker come out, Darius Mitchell from City of Atlanta Psychological Services, when he comes to talk about, it's his department that received those funds. So when he comes to talk about how they're going to implement it, then by the community connecting with what he's saying and what's happening within the City of Atlanta, this empowers us to now have a conversation in our own communities. We can take that back to Gwinnett County, who does not have a crisis intervention system in place. I know that they mentioned some training that's coming up, but I think that when we have the leadership that we've seen with how situations can be handled and how we can leverage relationships with businesses that are present here in Atlanta, I think that that's a roadmap that's something we can take back to our community leaders and say, okay, why don't we have this in our community?
Mm-hmm. So we have some very defined goals here for the event. We want to share material that the community can use to affect change in areas of concern. 2, ensure the community is equipped with a plan to engage with local legislators in regards to the same areas of concern identified in this proposal overview, and provide a channel for citizens to engage in an organized campaign for change. And so we've got some, as you mentioned, some pretty impressive speakers. As we mentioned, Chaplain, Department of Juvenile Justice Jonathan Wesley, mental health trainer for law enforcement crisis intervention Darius Mitchell, as well as Ratima Guest Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we have a former Black Panther, Rodney Williams, and then Sir Major Page from Black Lives Matter of Greater Atlanta. So it's not like, we're going to have the police in the same room, in the same space with Black Lives Matter. We're going to have the law enforcement. We're going to have the different communities from faith as well that are going to be involved in this conversation. And so so ultimately, what would be if you walked away from this event, Marlon, and we walked away, what sort of outcome do you feel like you want to achieve from this particular event?
Well, so I think the thing, first of all, is that I have to commend Ty, because she really took the lead and ran with this work in the Atlanta area.
Absolutely.
Black Greek Speak, yeah, she should, overwhelmingly commended for just the work that she has done. And Black Greek Speak, we've been around for about a little over 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And this launch in Atlanta is monumental for me in my mind, and really under the leadership of Ty has really taken on such a robust initiative. And so what I really want to be able to ensure is that, one, that really thought leaders, right, and advocates really start to unite with the work that Ty is doing in Atlanta. I really want to be able to see that. We can't just continue to have isolated individuals doing these kind of isolated work. And so really what I really hope comes out of this is that not only are people educated and empowered, but they're really led to begin to figure out what they can do. I have a mentor by the name of Ada Edwards who told me years ago, and she had a saying that nobody can do everything, but if everybody did something, then everything will get done. And so what I hope will happen is that everybody who comes will find something that they can get attached to, so that things will start to get done, and not just in Atlanta, right? So this is a movement. We are in Texas. We started Black Greek Speak in Texas and Houston, and it moved to Dallas, Fort Worth, and then it moved up to Cincinnati and Ohio, and now it's moving to the Atlanta region. That's what I think is happening. And so I hope at the end of this that really we start to see a groundswell of not just Black Greeks, but community of thought leaders and advocates who want to really try to get something done.
Ty, what would you like to see come out of this? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, go ahead.
So just to speak to what Marlon said, I think a really great example when he talked about, when you both mentioned, about Black Lives Matter being in the same space with the police. I think that the fact that they listened, the police department listened, is just magnanimous, and I'm so appreciative that we'll have people there from both spaces. And you did mention Sir Major Page, and he will be coming to talk about some of the things that they're working on in Atlanta right now for Black Lives Matter. They have 3 projects that they're currently working on. One is the Stop the Violence campaign, and that's from Black Lives Matter facing the community. And they're starting in DeKalb and Fulton County. I think that's an incredible effort. They have another campaign running to feed our people. And then they also have a citywide cleanup. I think that these things are so critical to us understanding and accepting our personal responsibility in our own well-being as a community. So I support it wholeheartedly, and this is partly what Black Greek Speak is designed to do, right? Because Black Lives Matter of Greater Atlanta is a grassroots organization. How wonderful is that we can lend assistance to them, with nobody. Just like he said, what Marlon mentioned, what his mentor said, he can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. When we harness the power of community, I think we're virtually unstoppable.
I really do appreciate you all making time today on such short notice. I thought it was something good for us to open the mic and try to get into some dialogue about this. Any websites where people can RSVP or let you know they're coming or support, even if it's just a PayPal where people can donate a